Hey guys, tonight we are going to do something that sounds incredibly boring on paper but is actually the secret origin story of the modern world. We aren't going to a battlefield, and we aren't going to a royal court. We are going to an office, but not the sleek air-conditioned office, you know. We are going back to the late 19th century, a time when cloud storage meant looking out a window, and saving a file meant literally stabbing a piece of paper with a metal spike. Tonight, we are going to witness the birth of the vertical filing cabinet. It sounds mundane, I know, but trust me, before this metal box existed, the world was drowning in a chaotic sea of paper. Without this invention, skyscrapers couldn't function, global corporations would have collapsed under their own weight. And you definitely wouldn't have a job description that involves organizing. So, prepare yourself, because you might get a paper cut. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, drop a comment below and let me know, what city are you in right now, and what time is it there? And if you have a messy desk right now, be honest. Leave a paperclip emoji in the comments so I know I'm not alone now. Dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. Imagine you are a clerk in a busy insurance office in Chicago. The year is 1870. The room is dimly lit by gas lamps that hiss and flicker, casting long, nervous shadows on the walls. The air smells of stale tobacco smoke, coal dust, and ink. You are wearing a stiff collar that is slowly choking you, and your sleeves are protected by those black fabric oversleeves to keep the ink off your cuffs. You are sitting at a massive roll-top desk. It looks like a fortress of wood, and in front of you is the enemy, paper. But you don't have a nice, neat stack of folders. Oh no. To your right sits the most dangerous tool on your desk, the spindle file. It looks like a receipt spike. You might see in a diner today, but sharper. It is a heavy metal base with a long, rusty spike sticking straight up. When a letter comes in, say, a claim from a farmer whose barn burned down, you don't file it. You stab it. THWACK. You impale the letter on the spike. Then the next letter comes. THWACK. By the end of the day, you have a shish kebab of correspondence. This brings us to a mainstream historical fact, the destructive filing method. This method was quick, sure, but it was destructive. You were literally punching holes in your own data. If you needed to find that farmer's letter from 3 weeks ago, good luck. You had to take every single piece of paper off the spike, one by one, usually tearing them in the process, until you found the one you wanted at the bottom. It was the last in, first out system from hell. But the spike wasn't just inefficient, it was a hazard. This leads to a niche, slightly gruesome detail, the spindle injury. There are accounts from the 19th century of clerks, exhausted after a 12-hour shift, leaning forward to read something by the dim gaslight and crunch impaling their hand. Or worse, an eye. On the file spike, it was a literal death trap sitting on your desk. You look at the spike, it is full. It looks like a paper Christmas tree of debt and complaints. So, what do you do when the spike is full? You take the bundle off. You tie a red string around it. This is literally where the term red tape comes from, originating from legal bundles in England, but widely used here too. And then, you shove it into a wooden cubbyhole on the wall. These are the pigeonholes. Your office wall looks like a honeycomb of hundreds of tiny wooden boxes. To fit a legal-sized document into a pigeonhole, you have to fold it. Specifically, you fold it into thirds trifold. Then you write the name on the outside of the fold, Smith, John. Barnfire, and you shove it in a hole. But here's the problem, gravity. As you shove more papers in, the old ones get pushed back. They crumple. They fall behind the desk. They disappear into the void. This leads to a massive academic controversy, the lost history debate. Historians argue that we have lost huge chunks of 19th century business history simply because of this folding method. Paper has a memory. If you fold a piece of paper and leave it for 20 years, the fibers break. When you try to unfold it later to read it, it disintegrates along the crease. By folding everything to fit into pigeonholes, the Victorians were actively destroying their own archives. They were prioritizing storage over retrieval. You sit there, staring at the wall of pigeonholes. Smith, John is in there somewhere, but so is Smith, James, and Smith, Jeremiah. You have to find a specific document. You stand up, you start pulling bundles out of the holes. Dust flies into your face. You sneeze. You unfold a document. Wrong Smith. You refold it. You unfold another dot. Wrong Smith. You realize that you aren't an information manager. You are a professional folder of paper. And as you look at the mountain of documents piling up on your desk, contracts, receipts, letters, you feel a sense of dread. Because the Industrial Revolution is speeding up, the railroads are bringing mail. Faster, the telegraph is spitting out messages. The paper is coming faster than you can stab it. The system is breaking, and you have no idea that the solution isn't to fold the paper ... but to stand it up. You are standing in the corner of the office, near a wash basin that smells of stagnant water and moldy sponges. Your hands are stained a deep, indelible purple. You look like you have been strangling a squid. You have successfully dealt with the incoming mail by stabbing it on a spike. But now, you face a much more terrifying task. The outgoing mail, you just spent 3 hours handwriting a contract for a client named Mr. Black. It is a masterpiece of penmanship. The loops are perfect. The legal jargon is intimidating. But you can't just put it in an envelope and mail it. Why? Because if you mail it, it's gone. You have no record of what you wrote. If Mr. Black writes back in a month and says, "I never agreed to pay that price," you are defenseless. You need a copy. In the 21st century, you would hit CC on an email or press a green button on a Xerox machine. In 1870, you have to perform a science experiment involving water, pressure, and terror. You walk over to a heavy cast iron machine sitting on a reinforced table. It looks like a torture device for crushing fingers. This is the letter copying press. This brings us to a mainstream historical fact. James Watt's other invention. Most people know James Watt as the father of the steam engine. But in 1780, he grew so tired of hand copying his own business letters that he invented this wet press method. It remained the standard office technology for nearly 150 years. It was the absolute cutting edge of data retention, and everyone hated it. Here is the process. You take your beautiful, crisp contract. You hope you wrote it with special copying ink. This leads to a niche, sticky detail: the sugar ink. Standard ink dries fast, but copying ink, it was often mixed with gum, Arabic, or sugar. This kept the ink slightly tacky and soluble on the page for a longer period. It also meant that if a fly landed on your letter while you were writing, it would get stuck there and die, becoming a permanent part of the legal record. You open a massive book. This is the letter book. It is bound in heavy leather and contains hundreds of pages of incredibly thin, translucent tissue paper, often called onion skin. You turn to the next blank page. You take a paintbrush and dip it in a bowl of water. You paint the tissue paper. This is the moment of truth. If you use too little water, the copy will be faint and unreadable. If you use too much water, the ink on your original letter will bleed, turning your masterpiece into a purple Rorschach test. You are sweating. You paint the water on. You blot it with a piece of oil board to remove the excess. You place your original letter under the damp tissue paper. You close the book. You shove the whole heavy book into the iron press. You grab the handle. You spin the heavy screw. Crunch. You apply hundreds of pounds of pressure. You are literally crushing the ink from the original page up into the damp tissue paper. You wait. How long? That's the art. Too short, no copy. Too long. The papers fuse together into a paper match brick. You spin the wheel back. You slide the book out. You gently peel the tissue paper back. Ideally, you see a perfect violet-colored duplicate of your letter on the tissue paper, which you read through the back of the thin paper. But today, you use too much water. You look at the original contract. It is blurred. The signature looks like a smudge. It is ruined. You have to rewrite the whole thing. You suppress a scream. This daily struggle brings us to a massive academic controversy: the best evidence rule. For decades, courts struggled with these wet press copies. Camp A, the traditionalists, argued that a press copy was not a true document. It was a secondary ghost. It was blurry. It could be altered. They demanded the original letter in court. Camp B, the pragmatists, argued that since the original was mailed away, the press copy in the bound book was the only record the business retained. Therefore, it had to be admissible as evidence. This fight shaped the early laws of evidence. It forced the legal system to accept that a copy, even a blurry, wet one, had legal weight. It was the grandfather of the electronic discovery battles we see today. You rewrite the letter. You press it again. This time, it works. You peel it apart. You hang the damp tissue page up to dry so it doesn't stick to the next page. Your office looks like a laundry line of wet paper. But now, look at what you have created. You have a bound book. It contains every letter you sent in chronological order. January 1st, January 2nd, January 3, RD. This seems organized, right? Wrong. It is a retrieval nightmare. Imagine Mr. Black calls you 6 months later. He wants to discuss that contract. You have to find it. You know it was written sometime in the past, but was it January or March? You have to haul the heavy letter book off the shelf. You have to thumb through hundreds of fragile tissue pages, and what if you have 10-letter books? You are searching through a linear timeline for a specific subject. It is like trying to find a specific scene in a VHS tape by rewinding and fast-forwarding. But the tape weighs 20 pounds in tears if you touch it. And there is a bigger problem. Your incoming mail on the spindle or in the pigeonhole is separated from your outgoing mail in the book. If you want to see the whole conversation, the letter Mr. Black sent you, and the reply you sent him, you have to look in 2 different places. You have to grab the folded bundle from the pigeonhole and the heavy book from the shelf. You are physically running across the room to merge data streams. This is the bound book era. It is an era where information is trapped in books. You cannot rearrange the pages. You cannot group them by client. You are a slave to the calendar. If Mr. Black becomes a huge client and you exchange 50 letters with him, those 50 letters are scattered across 50 different places in the book. Sandwiched between letters to Mr. Green and Mrs. White. You look at the shelf of letter books. They are uniform, heavy, and impressive. They look like order, but you know the truth. They are coffins for information. Once a letter goes in there, it is buried. You rub your purple-stained hands on your apron. You are tired of the water. You are tired of the iron wheel. You dream of a world where a piece of paper can be free. A world where you can put Mr. Black's letter next to your reply. In the same place, but that would require breaking the book binding. And in 1870, breaking a binding is considered insanity. It would mean loose paper. And loose paper gets lost. Or so everyone thinks. But outside your window, you are standing at the back of the office, in a dark, windowless corner known as the morgue. It isn't for dead bodies. It is for dead information. But today, your boss, Mr. Grimshaw, has decided that a specific skeleton needs to dance. Bring me the entire correspondence regarding the Union Pacific Railroad account. He barks, chomping on a cigar from 1868 to present. He says it so casually. Bring me the correspondence, as if you can just click a folder icon. But you know the truth. You aren't just retrieving a file. You are about to perform a feat of weightlifting and archaeological excavation. You look at the wall of shelves. It is lined with the bound volumes. These are the letter books we made in the previous chapter. Plus, something even worse, the guard books. This brings us to a niche, largely forgotten office torture device. The guard book. While you used the wet press to copy your outgoing letters into books, what did you do with the incoming letters? If you were a serious firm, you didn't just leave them in pigeonholes. You pasted them into a book. Imagine a giant scrapbook. Every time a letter arrived, you took a pot of glue, pasted the letter onto a blank page in a massive ledger, and wrote the date. This meant that the letter from the Union Pacific Railroad was now physically glued to a heavy book. It was trapped. You could take it out to show Mr. Grimshaw. You had to bring the whole book. You start with the index. Every volume has a few pages at the front with a grid of letters. This is the search engine of the 19th century. You look under U for Union. There are dozens of entries. Union Pacific, page 5, page 12, page 12, page 88, page 156. You write these numbers down, then you realize the correspondence spans 3 years. That means 3 different incoming guard books and 3 different outgoing letter books. That is 6 massive volumes. You heave the first volume off the shelf. It weighs about 25 pounds. It smells of decaying leather and acidic paper. You carry it to Mr. Grimshaw's desk. Then you go back for the second. Then the third. By the time you are done, his desk is groaning under 150 pounds of leather-bound history. Now, the nightmare begins. The retrieval. Mr. Grimshaw wants to read the conversation in order. He wants to see the letter we sent, and then the reply they sent. But they are in different books. You have to open volume A outgoing to page 5. Then you have to open volume B incoming to page 12. No, not that one, Grimshaw yells. That is the reply to the invoice. I want the reply to the contract. You have to flip back and forth. You are cross-referencing 2 different timelines physically separated by binding. You are running around the desk, opening and closing books, trying to reconstruct a conversation that happened 2 years ago. It is like trying to read a text message thread where your messages are on an iPad and your friend's messages are on a stone tablet, and you have to hold both at the same time. This brings us to a mainstream historical reality, the static nature of information. In this era, information was chronological, not topical. The defining organizational principle of the world was time. When did it happen? If you wanted to see all letters about the railroad, you could. You could only see all letters from January. The subject matter was scattered across time. To group things by subject, like railroad, required you to physically destroy the chronological order, which was impossible because the pages were sewn together. You were a slave to the calendar. Mr. Grimshaw is getting frustrated. Where is the attachment they sent? The survey map. You feel a cold sweat. The map didn't fit in the book, sir. Then where is it? In the pigeonholes. Fold it up. Find it. You run to the pigeonholes. We will get to those in a minute, but the point is the information is fragmented. The map is on the wall. The letter is glued in a book. The reply is pressed in another book. To understand one business deal, you have to look in 3 different places. This leads to a massive academic controversy. The sanctity of the binding? Why did they do this? Why glue letters into books? Why not just keep loose papers in a box? Business historians debate the legal fear of the loose leaf. Campa, the security theorists, argues that this system was driven by a fear of fraud. A bound book is secure. If you tear a page out of a sewn ledger, it is obvious. If you paste a letter in, it stays there. In a court of law, a bound book was golden evidence. It proved the timeline. Camp B, the loose leaf radicals, argues that this fear held back capitalism for 50 years. They argue that businessmen were so terrified of losing a document that they imprisoned their documents in unreadable formats. They prioritized custody, keeping it safe over utility, using it. Essentially, they treated a business letter like a holy scripture that had to be enshrined, rather than a piece of data that needed to be processed. Mr. Grimshaw slams the ledger shut. Dust puffs up. "This is useless," he shouts. "I can't find anything. It takes me an hour to read 5 minutes of history." He pushes the stack of books away. Take them back. You haul the 150 pounds of leather back to the morgue. Your arms are shaking. Your back aches. You look at the shelves. They are full. The business is growing. You are generating more paper every day. Next year, you will need another shelf. Then another room. There are law firms in London and New York during this period that are literally running out of building space because their floor joists are sagging under the weight of these books. The physical weight of memory is crushing the infrastructure. You realize that the book is a dead end. As long as information is glued, sewn, and bound, it cannot move, it cannot flow. You need a system where you can take a single piece of paper out, look at it, and put it back anywhere you want. You need the freedom of the loose leaf. But to get there, you have to overcome the greatest psychological barrier of the 19th century, the fear that if a paper is tied down, it will fly away. You look at the wall of pigeonholes next to the bookshelves. That is the only place where paper is loose. But, as we are about to see, the pigeonhole is in a solution. It's just a different kind of coffin, one that requires you to be an expert at origami. You turn away from the heavy, leather-bound coffins of the guard books and face the other monster in the room. It covers the entire north wall of the office, floor to ceiling. It is a massive wooden grid containing hundreds of small, dark, square compartments. These are the pigeonholes. If the bound book is a prison for information, the pigeonhole is a dormitory. A very crowded, dusty, disorganized dormitory. Mr. Grimshaw is still yelling about the missing map. You know exactly where it should be. It should be in the pigeonhole marked U for Union Pacific. But when you look at slot U, it is vomiting paper. Bundles of documents are sticking out, threatening to cascade onto the floor like a paper avalanche. You sigh, you have to dive in. You pull out a bundle. It is tied with pinkish red ribbon. This brings us to a mainstream historical fact, the origami of bureaucracy. In the 19th century, you didn't just file a paper, you sculpted it. Standard letter paper, 5 times 11 inches, or the equivalent foolscap size, was too big to fit flat in these tiny holes. So, every single legal document, contract, or map had to be folded. You fold the bottom up, then the top down. You turn the document into a long, narrow rectangle, about 4 inches wide and 9 inches tall. This shape is called the brief. It is why lawyers carry briefcases. Cases originally designed to hold these folded bundles, not flat files. But the folding is the end. You have to label it. Since the document is folded, you can see what is inside. So, you have to write a summary on the outside panel. This is called docketing. You write, Union Pacific Survey Map Twin Sector 720 January 1870. You have to do this for every single piece of paper. If you have sloppy handwriting, the file is lost forever. If you are lazy and don't docket it, it becomes a mystery packet that you have to unfold to identify. You dig through the U-hole, you find a packet, you check the docket. Union Pacific Thufi invoice. Wrong one, you shove it back in, you pull out another. Union Pacific Thufi complaint about coal. Wrong one, you shove it back. As you shove, you hear a sound, crinkle. The paper at the back of the hole is getting crushed. This is the physics of the pigeonhole. It operates on a push system. The new stuff pushes the old stuff into the darkness. There are stories of clerks dismantling old desks and finding wills, deeds, and uncashed checks that had slipped over the back of the pigeonhole drawers and rested in the dead space behind the furniture for 50 years. This leads to a niche, sensory detail, the file dust. Because these papers are folded and shoved into open wooden boxes, they gather dust. Not just a little dust, decades of coal soot from the heating stove. When you pull a bundle out from the back, it is coated in a thick, black, greasy layer. You have to blow it off. Poof, which sends a cloud of grime into your face and onto your white shirt. To be a clerk in this era is to be perpetually covered in the physical residue of the past. You finally find the map. It was jammed diagonally at the top, bent almost in half. You unfold it. The paper is brittle, along the crease lines, where it has been folded for 3 years. The fibers have snapped. You open the map, and it falls apart in your hands. It separates into 3 neat rectangles. The filing system has literally destroyed the data. You tape it back together using gummed paper, since clear tape doesn't exist yet, and bring it to Grimshaw. He looks at the tattered map. He looks at you. "We need a better system," he grumbles. "I saw a cabinet in a catalog called a Woodruff. It lays the papers flat." This brings us to a massive academic controversy, the horizontal versus vertical war. Before the vertical file won, there was a brief, intense battle for the soul of the office. The pigeonhole was the enemy. Everyone agreed on that. It folded and ruined paper. So, inventors created flat files, like the Woodruff or the Shannon file. These were cabinets with shallow drawers where papers lay flat, like pancakes. Campa, the flat filers, argued that this was the only way to preserve paper. Gravity is kind to flat paper. It does curl, it doesn't tear. Camp B, the vertical visionaries, who don't quite exist yet in your office, argued that flat filing is a space hog. Think about it. A drawer can only hold maybe 50 papers before it gets too heavy, or you can find anything at the bottom. To store 10,000 papers, you need a cabinet with 200 drawers. It would take up the whole wall. The flat files solved the folding problem, but it failed the density problem. You look at the wall of pigeonholes. It is a monument to inefficiency. It represents a mindset that treats information as separate, isolated chunks. Slot A is for invoices. Slot B is for receipts. Slot C is for letters. The information is siloed. If you want to see the story of the Union Pacific deal, you can the story is broken into pieces. The letter is in the book. The map is in the pigeonhole. The contract is in the safe. You are the only link. Your brain is the only index. If you quit, or if you get hit by a trolley, no one will ever find the Union Pacific map again. You feel a headache coming on. The office is growing. You are processing 500 letters a week. Soon, you will need a ladder to reach the top pigeonholes. Soon, the paper will push you out of the room, but miles away, in a library in Boston, a man with a magnificent beard and a severe case of obsessive-compulsive disorder is looking at a book and thinking, "This is wrong." He isn't thinking about business letters. He is thinking about book titles. But his idea, the idea that a single unit of information should be independent, movable, and stand on its edge, is about to jump from the library to the office. His name is Melville Dewey, and he is about to teach you that the secret to organizing the world is a book, and it is a box. It's a card. We are leaving the sooty, chaotic insurance office for a moment to visit a place that smells of silence and strict rules. We are in a library in Boston, or perhaps Amherst College, and we are looking at a man who is arguably the patron saint of organization. His name is Melville Dewey. Actually, he was born Melville, but he shortened it to Melville because he was obsessed with efficiency and thought "le" was a waste of ink. He even tried to change his last name to Dewey for a while. But that didn't stick. Dewey is looking at a library catalog in the 1870s. A library catalog was a bound book. If you wanted to find Moby Dick, you opened the volume and looked down the list. But here was the problem. Libraries buy new books. If you buy a new book that starts with but the page for ma is full, what do? You have to write it in the margin or at the end, or rewrite the whole book. The catalog was static. The collection was dynamic. It was a conflict that drove librarians insane. Dewey did invent the index card.
Linnaeus used them for plants earlier, but he weaponized it. He said, "One item, one card." Instead of writing titles in a book, he wrote each book title on a single stiff, 3 times 5-inch card. Then he stood the cards on their edge vertically in a drawer. If he bought a new book, he just pulled the drawer open, parted the cards, and slipped the new one in. It was revolutionary. It was expandable. It was resortable. You could sort by author then, 10 minutes later, resort by subject. The information was liberated from the binding. This brings us to a mainstream historical fact: the Library Bureau. Dewey wasn't just a thinker. He was a capitalist. He started a company called the Library Bureau in 1876 to sell these cards and the cabinets to hold them. He standardized the size. The 3 times 5 card, 5 times 12.5 centimeters, became the universal standard for information. It was the byte of the 19th century. But here is the twist. Dewey was focused on index cards. He was focused on metadata information about the books, not the books themselves. He didn't think this applied to business letters. Why? Because business letters are floppy. A card is stiff. It stands up. A letter is flimsy. If you stand it up on its edge, it slumps, it curls, it slides down. It behaves like a drunk person trying to stand in a queue. So while libraries became models of vertical efficiency with their beautiful card catalogs, businesses stayed stuck in the dark ages of pigeonholes and flat files. The gap between library tech and office tech widened. Librarians were the high-tech wizards of the 1880s. Business clerks were the dinosaurs. But the pressure was building. This leads to a niche, technological catalyst, the typewriter. In the 1870s and 80s, the typewriter began to enter the office. Before the typewriter, handwriting varied. Some wrote big, some wrote small, but the typewriter standardized the size of the text, and more importantly, it standardized the paper. To work in a typewriter, paper had to be a specific width. The standardization of paper size, roughly 5 times 11 inches, was the prerequisite for the file cabinet. You can build a standard cabinet if everyone is using different-sized scrolls and scraps. Back in your office, Mr. Grimshaw is yelling again. He bought a Shannon file. This was a flat file invention. It was a board with an arch like a modern ring binder. You punched holes in your letters and threaded them onto the arch. It was better than the pigeonhole. It kept things secure. But to find a letter in the middle, you had to lift the entire stack of papers above it. If the stack was heavy, the arch snapped, or the holes tore. The hole. Grimshaw screams, holding a torn contract. We punched a hole right through the signature. You look at the Shannon file. It is a halfway solution. It acknowledges that papers should be kept together, but it still traps them in a chronological stack. It is vertical in concept. The arch goes up, but horizontal in practice. You need something else. You need the stability of Dewey's cards, but for floppy paper. You need a way to make paper stand up and salute. The year is moving toward 1893. The world is looking toward Chicago. Chicago is hosting the World's Columbian Exposition. It is going to be the White City, a showcase of the future. Electricity, moving walkways, Ferris wheels, and in a small corner of the Liberal Arts Building, the Library Bureau is setting up a display. They are showing off their card catalogs, but they are also showing off something new, something experimental. They are showing that maybe, just maybe, you can put things other than cards in those drawers. You are about to go to the fair, you are about to see the future, but you aren't going to see a file cabinet. Yet, you are going to see a system, and you are going to meet a man named Edwin Sables. He isn't an inventor. He isn't an engineer. He is just a guy who really hates folding envelopes. You are standing in the middle of a dream. The year is 1893, and you are in Chicago at the World's Columbian Exposition. The buildings around you are alabaster white, neoclassical palaces that look like Rome reborn on Lake Michigan. The air hums with a strange new energy. Electricity, but you aren't here for the Ferris wheel, the first one ever built, or the belly dancers. You are wandering through the liberal arts building, looking for ideas. You see the library bureau display. It is sleek. It is modern. Rows of beautiful oak cabinets with tiny drawers. You watch a librarian demonstrate. She pulls a drawer. Zip. She flips through cards. Flip, flip, flip. She finds a record in seconds. Vertical. You whisper. It's all vertical. But the drawers are tiny. They fit 3 times 5 cards. You can fit a mortgage deed in there. This brings us to the moment of conception. We shift our focus to a specific visitor, or perhaps he visited a similar display later. Accounts vary, but the spirit is here. His name is Edwin Sables. Sables is not a librarian. He is an insurance man from Columbia, South Carolina, and he is currently suffering from a filing-induced rage. Sables deals with policies. An insurance policy is a large document. It comes in a long, narrow envelope. In his office, he has to fold these policies 3 times and shove them into pigeonholes. But pigeonholes are open. They get dusty. The paper's yellow. And worst of all, the folds wear out. Sables looks at the library bureau's card catalog. He has a radical thought. What if the envelope is the card? He goes back to his office. He doesn't buy a cabinet because they don't exist yet. He goes to a cigar shop. He buys empty cigar boxes. Why cigar boxes? Because they are the right width. He takes his envelopes. He doesn't fold them. He stands them up on their long edge inside the cigar box. He packs them in tight. Since they are in envelopes, they have some stiffness. They stand up. He puts a lid on the box. It works. He can flip through the envelopes like cards. Flip, flip, flip. He can find Smith without unfolding Jones. This leads to a mainstream historical fact. The vertical filing patent. Sables realizes he is onto something. He takes his idea to a company called the Globe Files Company. Later, Globe Wernicke. He tells them, make me a cabinet, but make the drawers big enough to hold a letter standing up. Globe builds it, but they don't patent it. Sables tries to patent it himself in 1898, and here is the kicker. The patent office rejects him. Why? Because they say, this is not an invention. It is just turning a box on its side. This brings us to a massive academic controversy, the non-obviousness of genius. Was the vertical file an invention? Campe, the patent office view, argued that gravity is a law of nature. Standing something up isn't a mechanical innovation. It's just rearranging. Camp B, the systems theorists, argues that this was one of the most profound conceptual shifts in business history. It required a total rethink of the unit of information. Before Sables, the unit was the book chronological. After Sables, the unit was the folder. Topical, Sables realized that the container, the envelope, could act as a structural support for the content, the paper. It wasn't just turning a box sideways. It was creating a random access memory system for paper. Globe Wernicke eventually builds the cabinets for him. They are beautiful. Oak, brass handles. But they have a fatal flaw, the slump. Sables used envelopes, but you want to file loose letters. Single sheets of paper. If you stand a single sheet of paper in a big drawer, what happens? It curls, it collapses, it slides to the bottom and becomes a crumpled mess. Gravity hates vertical paper. You are back in your office. You have ordered one of these new vertical cabinets from Globe. It arrives. It is a beast. 4 drawers high. You open the drawer. It is a long, empty wooden tunnel. You put a single letter in it. The letter falls over. You put 10 letters in. They fall over. You realize that unless the drawer is packed perfectly tight, like a brick, the papers will slump. But if you pack it tight, you can insert new papers. You can get your fingers in. You need the papers to stand up, but stay loose. You need a mechanical lung inside the drawer. You need something that pushes the papers forward when the drawer is empty, but backs off when the drawer is full. You look at the empty drawer. You grab a block of wood. You stick it behind the papers. It works until you add more papers. Then you have to move the block. You need a block that moves, a block that follows. This is the birth of the follower block, or compressor. It is the unsung hero of the filing cabinet. Without this simple, sliding metal plate that clicks into a track at the bottom of the drawer, vertical filing is physically impossible. It is the exoskeleton for the paper. You install the follower block, you slide it forward. Click, click, click. It squeezes the papers gently, holding them upright. You pull it back. Click, it gives you room to work. You smile. The paper is standing. It is defying gravity. But now you have a new problem. If you just shove loose papers in there, they get mixed up. Sabels used envelopes, but opening an envelope every time you want to read a letter is annoying. You need a container that is open at the top, a container that holds the paper but doesn't hide it. You need a folder, but ordinary paper tears. You need a material that is tough as leather, cheap as paper, and can be folded without cracking. You look at the ships in the harbor, you look at the ropes. Manila hemp. The fibers from the Abaxa plant in the Philippines, they make strong ropes. What if you are standing on a busy wharf, perhaps in Boston or New York? The air smells of salt spray, tar, and rotting fish. You are watching a massive clipper ship unload its cargo. Workers are hauling giant coils of thick, golden brown rope. This rope is the lifeline of the maritime world. It is strong, flexible, and resistant to salt water. It is made from abaxi, a plant native to the Philippines, which is a close relative of the banana tree. The sailors call it Manila hemp, named after the capital city from which it ships. You aren't a sailor. You are a frustrated office manager, but you look at that rope and you see the future of your filing cabinet. You go to a paper mill, you ask them, "Can you pulp this rope?" Old ropes, worn out hawsers, and raw abax fibers are ground down. They are boiled. They are pressed. The result is a paper that is unlike anything you have used for writing. It is thick. It has long, tough fibers visible to the naked eye. It is incredibly resistant to tearing, and because bleaching it white is expensive and damages the fibers, you leave it in its natural state. It is a sandy, golden yellow color. You take a sheet of this manila paper. You fold it in half. It doesn't crack at the spine like cheap wood pulp paper. It bends smoothly. It acts like a hinge. You place your loose letters inside the fold. You have just invented the manila folder. This brings us to a mainstream historical fact, the icon of bureaucracy. The manila folder is so ubiquitous today that we don't even see it. It is the universal icon for directory on your computer. But in the 1890s, this object was a high-tech breakthrough. Before the folder, papers in a vertical file, if they existed, would rub against each other. They would catch on the follower block. They would get dog-eared. The folder acts as a bodyguard. For the documents, it takes the friction, it takes the abuse. It is a sacrificial jacket that protects the fragile information inside. You take your new yellow folders back to the office. You put them in the Globe Wernicke cabinet. They stand up perfectly. The stiffness of the manila hemp fights gravity. The letters inside stay straight. But you notice a problem. If you put one letter in a folder, it sits fine. If you put 50 letters in, the Union Pacific file is getting thick. The folder bulges, it curls. The bottom of the folder becomes a round U shape, and the whole thing tries to roll upward like a scroll. You need to hack the fold. You take the folder out. You look at the bottom crease. You use a machine to press 3 more creases parallel to the first one, about a 1/4 inch apart. These are the score lines, or expansion scores. This leads to a niche, brilliant design detail, the box bottom effect. Most people ignore those little lines at the bottom of a folder. They think they are decoration. They are actually emergency expansion joints. When the file gets fat, you don't just stuff it in. You fold the paper along the 2nd or 3rd score line. This transforms the bottom of the folder from a V shape into a flat U shape, essentially a box with a flat bottom. Now, the fat folder sits flat on the bottom of the drawer. It doesn't T-roll. It supports its own weight. You have turned a piece of paper into a structural container. You fill the drawer with these yellow folders. It looks beautiful. It looks uniform. But there is a hidden danger lurking in that golden fiber. This brings us to a massive academic controversy: the slow-motion fire of archives. Archivists and historians have a love-hate relationship with the manila folder. Camp A, the utility school, praises it as the tool that saved business. It was cheap, tough, and standardized. It allowed for the mass centralization of data. Camp B, the chemical school, calls it a disaster. Manila paper, especially the cheaper versions made later from wood pulp mixed with hemp, contains lignin and alumrosin sizing. Lignin is the stuff that makes trees stiff, but when it decays, it produces acid. Over decades, the acid in the folder migrates into the documents inside. It turns them yellow. It makes them brittle. It burns them chemically. If you go to an old archive today, you will see Manila burn, a yellow stain on the white letters where they touch the folder. The folder was a bodyguard that slowly poisoned its client. Did the Victorians know this? They thought they were preserving history. In reality, they were wrapping it in a slow-acting acid bath. But in 1895, you don't know about pH levels. You only know that the system is working. You slide the drawer shut. Thud, it sounds solid. You open it again. You see a sea of yellow, hundreds of identical yellow folders, and you realize you have created a new problem. They all look exactly the same. Where is Union Pacific? Where is United States Steel? You can see the names. The names are written on the front of the folder, but the folders are packed tight. You can only see the top edge. You need a way to make the name pop up. You grab a pair of scissors. You take a pristine folder. You cut away the top edge, leaving a small rectangle sticking up on the left side. You write A on it. On the next folder, you cut away the edge, but leave a rectangle in the middle. You write B on it. You have just invented the tab cut. You have turned the folder into a user interface. You are building a landscape of little paper mountains that will guide your eye to the target. But how do you arrange them? Do you put them in a straight line? A zigzag? You are about to enter the world of visual ergonomics, and you are going to find out that if you put the tabs in the wrong place, the human eye gets confused and the brain shuts down. You sit at your desk surrounded by snippings of yellow hemp paper. You are designing the dashboard of the office, and you are about to discover the straight line versus staggered war. You are standing in front of your magnificent 4-drawer Globe Wernicke oak cabinet. You slide a drawer open. It glides smoothly on its steel rollers. A satisfying mechanical whoosh inside. You see hundreds of your new golden manila folders standing upright, pressed gently by the follower block. It is neat. It is uniform. It is beautiful. It is also useless. You have created a sea of yellow because every folder is the exact same height and color. You can see where one ends and the next begins. To find Union Pacific, you have to walk your fingers through the files, reading the handwriting on the front of each one. Tick, tick, tick. It takes you 20 seconds to find the file. In the high-speed world of 1895 business, 20 seconds is an eternity. Mr. Grimshaw will fire you. You need a navigation system. You need a way to make the names pop up and hit you in the eye. You grab your scissors again. You take a fresh folder. You cut away 80% of the top edge, leaving a small tab sticking up on the far left. On the next folder, you leave a tab in the second position on the next. The third, you have just invented the staggered tab system. This brings us to a mainstream historical fact, the cut standards. If you go to an office supply store today, you will see boxes labeled 1/3 cut or 1/5 cut. This terminology was born right here. 1/3 cut means the tabs are wide, a third of the folder width. You get 3 positions, left, center, right. 1/5 cut means the tabs are narrower. You get 5 positions across the width of the drawer. You decide on the 5th cut. It gives you a cascading visual effect. Position 1, Union Pacific, contracts. Position 2, Union Pacific, maps. Position 3, Union Pacific, invoices. You arrange them in the drawer. Now, when you open it, you don't see a flat sea of yellow. You see a mountain range. Your eye doesn't have to read. It scans. You look for the position, not the text. You pull out your stopwatch. You close your eyes. Find Union Pacific maps. Open eyes. Scan. Grab 3 seconds. You have cut the retrieval time by 85%. You have turned a storage box into a random access database. But now you face a design philosophy problem. How do you organize the mountain range? Do you put all the AS in position 1 and all the BS in position 2? Or do you make a zigzag pattern for every file? This leads to a niche, psychological insight, the straight line logic. Early efficiency experts discovered something about the human eye. We hate zigzags. They make us dizzy. If you have 1,000 folders with tabs popping up randomly left, right, center, left, the eye gets tired. It's visual noise. So, the experts, companies like Library Bureau and Globe Wernicke, started selling systems. Not just folders. They proposed the straight line system. You use guide cards, heavy, stiff cardboard dividers with tabs in the center to mark the alphabet. A, B, C. Then, you put all the individual folders with tabs on the right. You create 2 clean lines of sight. Your eye shoots down the center to find U. Then your eye shoots to the right to find Union Pacific. It is an optical highway. But wait, what if you have a file that isn't TNA? What if it is a category like miscellaneous? This brings us to a massive academic controversy, the alpha versus numeric war. In the early 1900s, a fierce debate raged in the pages of magazines like System and Business. S-Man S Magazine. CAMPA, the alphabetizers, argued for direct name filing. You file by name, U for Union Pacific. It is intuitive. You don't need an index. Camp B, the numerists, argued that the alphabet is chaotic. Think about it. S is a huge letter. Smith takes up 3 drawers. Q takes up an inch. The drawers become uneven. The system gets lopsided. Camp B argued for numeric filing. Every client gets a number. Union Pacific is number 1045. You file the folder in drawer number 1000, slot 45. It is perfectly even. It is infinite. You can just keep adding numbers at the end. But you need an index. You need a card catalog to tell you that Union Pacific is number 1045. CAMPA screamed. That is 2 steps. You have to look at a card, then go to the file. It is inefficient. Camp B screamed back. But it is accurate. You never miss file number 1045. But you might file Union under U or Pacific under P. You stand in front of your drawer. You are the deciding vote. Mr. Grimshaw hates looking things up in indexes. He wants to open the drawer and grab the file. Direct name, you decide, alphabetical. You are choosing speed over structural perfection. You label the tabs. You type the names on little strips of paper and glue them onto the manila tabs. You slide the files in. It is a masterpiece. You have the cabinet, hardware. You have the follower block engine. You have the manila folder chassis. You have the tab system, user interface. The vertical filing system is complete, but as you stand there, admiring your work, you hear a sound from the outer office. It is a rhythmic, percussive sound. Clack, clack, ping. It is the sound of a typewriter, and then you hear a ripping sound. The typist is pulling a sheet of paper out of the roller, but she isn't pulling out one sheet. She is pulling out three, a white sheet, a black sheet, and a yellow sheet. Carbon paper. You freeze. In the old days of the wet press, making a copy was hard work. You only copied the important stuff, but with carbon paper, you can make a copy of everything instantly, for free, with zero effort. Every memo, every note, every happy birthday, wish. Suddenly, your beautifully organized cabinet isn't just storing contracts. It is being flooded with the 19th century equivalent of reply all emails. The volume of paper is about to explode. Your 4-drawer cabinet will be full in a week. You are going to need more cabinets. Thousands of them, and you are going to realize that wood isn't good enough anymore. Wood burns. You need something stronger. You need the material of skyscrapers. You need steel, and the people who make steel are about to launch the most aggressive, fear-mongering marketing campaign in furniture history to make you buy it. You are standing behind Miss Miller's desk. The noise is rhythmic, percussive, and relentless. Clack, clack, ping, zep. Miss Miller is a typewriter. In the 1890s, the word referred to both the machine and the woman operating it. She is pounding the keys of a Remington number 2 with a violence that seems unnecessary for writing a letter about coal shipments, but she has to pound. She isn't just printing ink on one page. She is trying to drive a metal hammer through a sandwich of papers. She pulls the sandwich out of the roller. She peels it apart. Top layer, the original white letter. Crisp, beautiful. Middle layer, a sheet of flimsy, waxy, black paper that sheds soot like a chimney. Bottom layer, a thin, crinkly, semi-transparent sheet of yellow paper with a slightly fuzzy copy of the text. Carbon paper. You stare at the yellow sheet. This is the carbon copy to you. In 1898, this is magic. You didn't have to use the wet press. You didn't have to turn a wheel. You didn't have to wait for it to dry. A copy was born at the exact same moment as the original. It was an immaculate conception of bureaucracy. This brings us to a mainstream historical fact, the origin of CC. You know that field in your email, CC. It stands for carbon copy today. Clicking CC costs nothing. It takes zero physical space, but in 1898, CC, someone meant generating a physical object. And that object had to go somewhere. It had to go into your cabinet. In the days of the wet press, making a copy was a hassle. You only copied the important stuff, contracts, legal threats, big invoices. But carbon paper, it is effortless. It is the path of least resistance. So, you start copying everything. You copy the contract, you copy the cover letter. You copy the memo telling the janitor to buy more soap. You are generating a shadow archive. For every piece of paper that leaves your office, a ghost of that paper stays behind. This leads to a niche, sensory nightmare, the onion skin cut. To make the carbon copy legible, the bottom sheet had to be incredibly thin, so the force of the typewriter key could push through. This paper is called onion skin. It is lightweight, crinkly, and surprisingly strong. It is also sharp. If you riffle through a folder full of onion skin copies, the edges act like serrated knives. Your cuticles are a mess of tiny, stinging paper cuts. And the carbon, it gets everywhere. It is a mixture of soot and wax. It stains your cuffs. It smudges your nose. It is the coal dust of the white-collar world. You look at the Union Pacific folder. Last month, it was half an inch thick. Now, thanks to Miss Miller and her carbon paper, it is 3 inches thick. The folder is bulging. The score lines at the bottom are maxed out. You have to start a second folder. Union Pacific, Vol. 2. This brings us to the explosion. Your 4-drawer Globe Wernicke cabinet is full. You buy another one. 2 months later, it is full. You are no longer filing documents. You are filing correspondence. You are archiving the stream of consciousness of the corporation. Dear Sir, I received your letter. File it. Dear Sir, I will reply next week. File it. Dear Sir, sorry for the delay. File it. You are drowning in yellow onion skin. This leads to a massive academic controversy. The total archive debate. With the advent of carbon paper, a philosophical war broke out in the business world. Camp A, the hoarders argued, keep everything. Paper is cheap, memory is expensive. If you throw a memo away, you might be sued in 10 years and lose the case because you could prove you ordered the soap. This was the birth of the cover your ass culture. Camp B, the weeders argued. This is madness. We are paying rent to store trash. We need a retention schedule. Destroy everything after 5 years. Camp A won. Fear always wins. Businesses decided it was safer to buy more cabinets than to risk deleting history. The filing cabinet ceased to be a treasure chest for valuable deeds and became a landfill for daily chatter. You look around your office, it has transformed. The walls are lined with oak cabinets. They loom over you like wooden monoliths. They are heavy, and they are made of wood. You are sitting in a room filled with dried paper fuel, separated by varnished oak, fuel, lit by gas lamps, fire, and populated by men smoking cigars, ignition. You are working inside a bomb. The Great Chicago Fire of 1871 is still a fresh memory. The Great Boston Fire of 1872. Businessmen are terrified of fire. If the office burns, the corporate memory burns. The contracts, the ledgers, the carbon copies, gone. Insurance money can rebuild the building, but it cannot rebuild the information. You look at your beautiful oak cabinets. They are elegant. They look like fine furniture, but they are tinderboxes. If a fire starts, that varnish will accelerate the flame. The paper inside will turn to ash in minutes. You need a fortress. You need a cabinet that can survive the apocalypse. You need steel, but there is a problem. In 1898, steel is for bridges. Steel is for rails. Steel is for ships. Steel furniture. That sounds cold. It sounds industrial. It sounds ugly. Gentlemen do not keep their correspondence in metal boxes. Metal rusts. Metal clangs. Metal feels like a factory locker room. You are about to witness the greatest marketing war in the history of office supplies. The steel barons are coming for your wood, and they aren't going to sell you steel based on beauty. They aren't going to sell it based on price. They are going to sell it based on fear. You pick up a magazine from your desk. Businessman. S magazine. There is an ad on the back. It shows a wooden. You are sitting at your desk, staring at a magazine advertisement that features a drawing of a skeleton sitting on a pile of ashes. The caption reads, "He lost his records. He lost his business." This is not a subtle metaphor. This is the new language of office furniture marketing. For the last 30 years, You have surrounded yourself with wood. Your desk is mahogany, your chair is walnut. Your filing cabinets are quarter, sawn oak. Wood is warm. Wood is dignified. Wood smells like success. But the salesmen knocking on your door today aren't selling dignity. They are selling steel, and they are terrified that you won by it. This brings us to a mainstream historical fact: the aesthetic resistance. In the early 1900s, businessmen hated steel furniture. They thought it looked cheap. They thought it felt cold to the touch. They associated metal furniture with hospitals, insane asylums, and factory locker rooms. A gentleman did not keep his contracts in a locker. So, the steel manufacturers, companies like Art Metal and Globe, Wernicke, who switched sides, had to lie. You walk into a showroom. The salesman points to a beautiful, dark-grained cabinet. It looks exactly like mahogany. You touch it. It is cold. It is metal. This leads to a niche, artistic detail: the faux grain artisans. To sell steel to snobs, manufacturers hired artists to hand-paint wood grain onto the metal. They used copper rollers and complex staining techniques to mimic the knots, the whorls, and the warmth of real timber. They offered mahogany, Circassian walnut, and quartered oak finishes. You aren't buying steel because it looks like the future. You are buying steel that is desperately trying to look like the past. You are buying a tank disguised as a tree. But why buy it at all? The salesman pulls out a lighter. He holds the flame to the wood. Nothing happens. Fireproof, he whispers. This is the trump card. The San Francisco earthquake and fire of 1906 has just terrified the nation. Entire archives of banks and law firms were incinerated. The only things that survived were in safes. The steel companies launched a campaign of terror. Wood is fuel, they said. You are storing your livelihood in a fireplace. You order the steel cabinets. They arrive a week later. The delivery men struggle. They are heavier than the wood ones. They place them against the wall. You slide a drawer. Open, clang, rattle. Rattle. The sound is different. It isn't the soft, hushed slide of wood on wood. It is the harsh, mechanical noise of ball bearings on steel tracks. It sounds like a machine. You put a folder in. Thud. The metal amplifies the sound. Your office no longer sounds like a library. It sounds like a factory. But are you actually safer? This brings us to a massive academic controversy: the oven effect. Did steel cabinets actually save documents? CAMPA, the Steel Trust, claimed yes. They staged public demonstrations where they set bonfires around their cabinets. The papers inside survived. Usually, Camp B, the fire marshals and physicists, argued that this was dangerous marketing. Here is the physics. Wood is an insulator. If a wooden cabinet catches fire, the outside burns, creating a layer of char carbon that insulates the inside. It takes a long time for the heat to penetrate. Steel is a conductor. If a fire sweeps through your office, the steel cabinet heats up instantly. It transfers that heat directly to the inside. The paper inside doesn't catch fire because there is no oxygen. It bakes. It undergoes pyrolysis. The paper turns brown, then black, then crumbles into dust without ever being touched by a flame. Camp B argued that in a high-intensity fire, a steel cabinet is essentially a Dutch oven. You are slow cooking your contracts. Some fire experts actually recommended thick, heavy wooden cabinets over thin, walled steel ones, because the wood bought you more time before the internal temperature spiked. But you don't know the thermodynamics of pyrolysis. You only know the marketing. You look at your row of mahogany, steel cabinets. They look invincible. You feel a sense of relief. You have armored your memory, but the arrival of steel changes something else. Wood is organic. It varies. It swells in the humidity. It shrinks in the dry winter. A wooden drawer has a personality. Sometimes it sticks. Sometimes it slides. You have to know how to jiggle it. Steel is uniform. It is precise. It is stamped by a machine. Every drawer is exactly the same. Your office is becoming standardized. The paper is standard 8 5x11. The folder is standard manila. The cabinet is standard steel 4-drawer. The environment is becoming a machine for processing information, and machines need operators. You look at your clerks, young men in stiff collars, hoping to become partners one day. They are expensive. They are ambitious. They get bored filing papers. You look at the typewriter, Miss Miller. She is fast. She is precise. She doesn't complain about the clang of the drawer. And crucially, she is cheaper. You realize that this new system, the vertical file, the carbon copy, the steel cabinet, doesn't require a clerk who understands the business. It just requires a filer who knows the alphabet. You are about to witness a demographic shift that will change the face of the workforce forever. The steel cabinet is going to open the door for women, not because of equality, but because men think that operating a filing cabinet is no longer intellectual work. It has become housekeeping. You sit back in your chair. The gas light reflects off the faux wood steel. The office is fireproof. The system is perfect, but the silence is gone. The clack, clack of the typewriter and the clang, clang of the cabinet are the new rhythm of business. You are no longer running a counting house. You are running a data factory. You are standing on the balcony of the mezzanine, looking down at the office floor. The year is now roughly 1910. The gas lamps are gone, replaced by the steady electric hum of incandescent bulbs. The smoky haze of cigars has lifted slightly. But the biggest change isn't the lighting, and it is the furniture. It is the people. 10 years ago, this room was a sea of black wool coats, stiff white collars, and moustaches. It was a male sanctuary. Young men started as clerks, filed papers, learned the trade, and eventually became managers. But look at the filing department now. It is a sea of white blouses, long skirts, and pinned-up hair. The men are gone. The filing cabinets are now manned, or rather womaned, entirely by a new class of worker, the file clerk. This brings us to a mainstream historical fact, the great gender flip. In 1870, less than 3% of clerical workers in the U.S. were women. By 1930, that number would hit 50%, and for file clerks specifically, it was nearly 90%. The vertical file cabinet didn't just organize paper. It reorganized society. It created a specific niche, the management of the external memory. That was deemed culturally suitable for women. Why? Because the cabinet standardized the work. In the old days of the pigeonhole, finding a document required hunting. It required intuition. It was seen as an apprenticeship for business. But the vertical file, it is a machine. It operates on strict rules. A follows B. One follows two. Business owners decided that this was executive training anymore. It was housekeeping. It was tidying up. And who was good at tidying up? You look at the advertisement on your desk. It shows a smiling woman easily sliding a drawer open. The caption, so simple, a girl can do it. You walk down to the floor. You watch Miss Miller, who has been promoted from typist to head of files. She is moving with incredible speed. She pulls a drawer. Her fingers dance over the tabs. She retrieves a folder. She closes the drawer. It is a ballet of efficiency. This leads to a niche, physiological stereotype, the dexterity myth, to justify hiring women and paying them half the wages of men. Management experts invented a biological excuse. They claimed that women had smaller hands and nimbler fingers that were better suited for manipulating card catalogs and file tabs. They argued that women had a natural patience for the monotony of the alphabet that men lacked. It was nonsense, of course. Men had been doing monotonous work in factories for centuries. The reality was simple economics. You are paying Miss Miller $12 a week. A male clerk would demand $25. The steel cabinet allowed you to de-skill the labor, and the gender wage gap allowed you to capitalize on it. But there is a physical reality to this work that the ads don't show. You watch a young girl, a runner, trying to file a document in the top drawer of a 4-drawer stack. She has to stretch, then she has to file one in the bottom drawer. She has to squat. This is the file clerk's calisthenics. A file clerk walks an average of 5 miles a day within the office. She does hundreds of squats. Because of this, the filing department became a controversial space. It was physically active. It was unladylike to be bending over and stretching in a corset. So, the filing room was often tucked away, hidden from the public eye. It was the engine room, and the women were the stokers. This brings us to a massive academic controversy, the pink-collar ghetto versus liberation. Did the filing cabinet liberate women or trap them? Campa, the liberationists, argues that the office was a godsend. Before this, a woman's options were factory work, dangerous, dirty, domestic service, grueling, low status, or teaching, which required education. The office was clean. It was respectable. You didn't get coal dust in your lungs. It was the first time women could enter the business world en masse. It gave them economic independence and a room of their own in the city. Camp B, the Marxist feminist critics, led by scholars like Harry Braverman, argues that this was a trap. The filing cabinet proletarianized clerical work. It severed the link between entry-level and management. A male clerk in 1870 could hope to become a partner. A female file clerk in 1910 had zero path to promotion. She was a component of the machine. The cabinet didn't empower her. It turned her into a human servo mechanism whose only job was to fetch data for the thinking men. She was the RAM, he was the processor, and the processor got all the credit. You stand there, watching the work. You see the social dynamic shifting. The men in the private offices ring a bell. The women run in with the files. The men make decisions. The women file the results. The office has become a two-tier society, divided by the steel wall of the cabinet. But there is another change happening, one that is less about gender and more about scale. You look at the row of cabinets. There are 50 of them now. That is 200 drawers. Each drawer holds 4,000 pieces of paper. That is 800,000 documents in one room. In the old days of pigeonholes, this amount of information would have required a warehouse. It would have been impossible to manage. But with the vertical file, you have compressed it. You have achieved high-density storage, and because you can store so much information in such a small footprint, you can do something that was previously impossible. You can grow up. You walk to the window. You look out at the Chicago skyline. The buildings are getting taller. 10 stories. 20 stories. You realize that the skyscraper isn't just made of steel beams and glass. It is made of paper density. If a modern corporation had to store its records in pigeonholes, the building would have to be 10 times wider to hold the paper. The rent would be astronomical. The vertical file cabinet allowed businesses to stack information as efficiently as architects stacked offices. You are about to understand the structural relationship between the cabinet and the skyscraper, and you are going to realize that without the humble file folder, the Empire State Building would just be a very tall, very empty shell. You are standing at the window of the Woolworth Building or perhaps the Singer Building in New York City. The year is 1915. You are 50 stories up in the air. The people down on Broadway look like ants. The carriages look like toys. You turn back to face the office. It is a vast, open floor plan, humming with the energy of 100 clerks and typists. And lining the walls, forming aisles like a library, are the sentinels of this new age, the steel filing cabinets. You realize that the building you are standing in and the cabinet you are using are actually the same machine. They are both machines designed to conquer, the most expensive enemy of the 20th century. Real estate. This brings us to a mainstream historical fact: the economics of density. In the 1850s, land in Lower Manhattan was affordable. You could have a sprawling, messy office, but by 1915, the price per square foot has skyrocketed. A skyscraper exists for one reason: to multiply the value of a single plot of land by stacking floors on top of each other. The filing cabinet does the exact same thing for paper. If you use the old pigeonhole system to store the millions of documents generated by a corporation like Standard Oil, you would need a building 3 times the size. The rent would bankrupt you. The vertical file is a skyscraper for paper. It allows you to stack 5,000 sheets of paper on a footprint of 2 square feet. It is the only reason you can afford to have your office in the clouds. But this density creates a terrifying physical problem. You look at the floor. It is covered in linoleum or wood parquet. Underneath, there are steel beams. But are they strong enough? This leads to a niche structural detail: the live load nightmare. Paper is heavy. It is made of wood, glue, and clay. A single file drawer, packed tight, weighs about 70 pounds. A 4-drawer cabinet weighs nearly 300 pounds. If you line a whole wall with them, you are placing thousands of pounds of dead weight on a specific strip of the floor. Architects had to redesign office buildings. They could just build rooms. They had to reinforce the floors specifically for the file room. There are horror stories of older, renovated buildings where a law firm moved in, loaded up their steel cabinets in the center of the room, and the floor literally bowed or collapsed into the office below. The sheer mass of the concentrated memory was heavier than the building could bear. You walk through the aisles of cabinets. It feels like a canyon. The steel companies, Art Metal, Shaw, Walker, are now marketing skyscraper cabinets. 5 drawers high, 6 drawers high. They are selling you the vertical dream, but this density creates a new anxiety: the lost file in a pigeonhole. If you lost a paper, it was probably just behind the desk in a system of 1 million files. If you misfile a document, if you put Union Pacific under V instead of U, it is gone. It is effectively deleted from existence. There is no search function. There is no Ctrl+F. You have to physically walk to the cabinet, open the drawer, and look. If it is not there, you have to look in the folder in front and the folder behind. If it is still not there, it is lost in the ocean of yellow. This brings us to a massive academic controversy: the bureaucracy of distance. Did the skyscraper and the file cabinet make business better, or just more distant? Camp efficiency experts argued that centralization was power. By having all the files in one building, the CEO could control an empire that spanned the globe. The file cabinet was the dashboard of the world. Camp B, the sociologists of work, like C. Wright Mills later on, argued that this created a disconnect. In the old days, the clerk knew the customer. "Oh, Mr. Smith, I remember his letter." In the new system, Mr. Smith is just file number 4056 in drawer 3, row 8. The sheer density of information forced the workers to stop caring about the content and only care about the location. The human element was filtered out by the manila folder. The customer became a unit of paper. You pull a file. It is thick. It smells of old carbon paper. You realize that this file has a life cycle. It starts on your desk, active. It moves to the steel cabinet, semi-active. But what happens when the drawer gets full? You can just buy more cabinets forever. The floor will collapse. The rent is too high. You have to purge. You take the oldest papers out of the back of the file. You put them in a cheap cardboard box. You call the janitor. "Take this to the basement," you say, or "send this to the warehouse in New Jersey." This is the birth of records management. The skyscraper is for the living documents. The warehouse is for the dead ones. You have created a tiered system of memory. Expensive real estate equals recent memory. Cheap real estate equals long-term memory. You stand by the window again. The sun is setting over the Hudson River. The lights of the city are coming on. Every light represents an office. Every office has a row of green or gray steel cabinets, millions of drawers, billions of sheets of paper. The city is essentially a giant filing mechanism. The people are just the biological robots that move the paper from one drawer to another. You feel a strange sense of vertigo. You built this system to control the chaos, but standing here, surrounded by tons of steel and paper, you wonder if the system is now controlling you. Can you stop it? Can you stop filing? Number, if you stop, the paper piles up. The business stops. The skyscraper goes dark. You are trapped in the loop, but there is a beauty in it, too. The silence of the file room, the smooth glide of the drawer, the smell of the manila hemp. It is a sanctuary of order in a disorderly world. You close the drawer, click, it locks. You have secured the day's work. You grab your hat. You head to the elevator. As you descend 50 floors, you aren't thinking about the millions of dollars you made or lost. You are thinking about that one folder, the one with the bent tab. You need to fix it tomorrow, because if the tab is bent, the system is imperfect. And in the 20th century, perfection is the only option. We are nearing the end of our journey. The system is built. The revolution is over. The cabinet is now an invisible part of the furniture. But before we close the drawer for the last time, we need to look at the object itself. The gray, metal box. How did it become the symbol of everything boring, yet everything essential? You are walking through the corridors of a massive government building in Washington, D.C. or London. The year is 1920. The air is thick with the smell of floor wax and the low hum of bureaucratic machinery. You pass a door marked Bureau of Investigation, the precursor to the FBI or Social Security Administration. You look inside. You don't see a few cabinets. You see a city of them. Rows and rows of steel monoliths arranged in precise grids, stretching as far as the eye can see. But these drawers aren't filled with invoices for coal or receipts for lumber. They are filled with people. This brings us to the most profound psychological shift caused by the vertical file, the invention of the dossier before the filing cabinet. The government knew you as a name in a ledger. You were a line item in a tax book or a census roll. But you didn't have a file. You didn't have a single physical folder that contained your birth certificate, your school grades, your tax returns, your fingerprints, and your medical history, all in one place. The vertical file made it possible to aggregate a human life into a bundle of manila paper. You pull a drawer open. You pick a random file, subject 8940. You open it. It tells a story. Not a chronological story, but a cumulative story. It allows the state to see you not as a person, but as a case. This leads to a mainstream historical fact. The surveillance state J. Edgar Hoover, the first director of the FBI, was a filing fanatic. He started his career at the Library of Congress. He learned the Dewey Decimal System. When he took over the FBI, he didn't just buy guns. He bought filing cabinets. He realized that information was a weapon, but only if it was retrievable. If you were a subversive, Hoover didn't need to arrest you immediately. He just needed to start a file on you. He could drop a report in a folder today. Another report next year. 10 years later, he could pull that folder and have a complete picture of your life. The filing cabinet became the memory bank of the police state. You feel a chill. In the business office, the cabinet was about efficiency. Where is the invoice? Here, it is about control. Who is this person? The steel walls of the cabinet protect the secrets of the state, but they also hold the secrets about you. This leads to a massive academic controversy, the iron cage of bureaucracy. Max Weber, the famous sociologist, wrote about the iron cage of rationality. Camp A, the optimists, argued that this system was fair. It treated everyone equally. You weren't judged by your family name, who you knew. You were judged by the documents in your file. It was the triumph of meritocracy. Camp B, the pessimists, argued that it was dehumanizing. When you walk into a government office to plead for help, the clerk doesn't look at your face. She looks at your file. If the paper says denied, you are denied. The human being is secondary to the paper avatar stored in the steel box. The person has become a shadow of the file. You look at the labels, confidential. Top secret. The manila folder, once a tool for organizing shipping receipts, has become a container for the deepest secrets of the nation. You realize that the system you helped build back in the 1890s, the tabs, the guides, the follower blocks, has grown up. It is no longer just a business tool. It is the nervous system of modern civilization. But systems have a limit. You look at the room. It is full. They are building a new wing just to hold the files. Paper takes up space as the population grows. As the government tracks more data, the cabinets are eating the building. You are running out of steel. You are running out of floors. You need a way to shrink the paper. You need to make the file invisible. You see a man in a lab coat walking by. He is holding a small strip of film, microfilm. It is the first crack in the rain of paper, but it is not the end. Decades later, a different kind of cabinet will appear, one that glows, one that hums, and it will steal the soul of your invention. You are standing in the lobby of a monolithic glass and steel tower in Midtown Manhattan. The year is 1955. The air is cool, conditioned by massive HVAC systems, and smells of ozone and floor polish. Men in gray flannel suits stream past you, heading for the elevators. You step into an elevator. You press the button for the 35th floor. The doors slide shut. Your ears pop as you ascend. But while you are moving up, something else is moving down. Behind the walls of the elevator shaft, there is a hidden circulatory system. It is a network of brass and steel pipes that hiss and thud. It is the pneumatic tube system, and it is carrying the lifeblood of the corporation. Files. This brings us to a mainstream historical reality. The vertical logistics of information. We established earlier that the filing cabinet allowed businesses to stack paper. The skyscraper allowed businesses to stack cabinets. But this created a new problem, latency. If the central files are in the basement, because they are too heavy for the upper floors, and the CEO is on the 50th floor, how does the CEO get the Union Pacific folder? He can wait for a clerk to walk up 50 flights of stairs. So, the skyscraper became a machine for moving paper against gravity. Miles of pneumatic tubes, conveyor belts, and dedicated dumbwaiters were installed in the walls of buildings like the MetLife Tower or the Empire State Building. A file clerk in the basement would roll a dossier into a cylinder, shove it into a breech, and thwump. Air pressure would shoot it up 50 floors in seconds. You are standing inside a giant vertical computer, where the packets of data are physical bundles of paper shooting through pipes. You step out on the 35th floor, the executive suite. The carpet is thick, the view is panoramic. But look at the desks, they are clean. There are no stacks of paper now. Take the elevator down to the 3rd floor. The doors open, the noise hits you, clack, clack. The smell of dust. This is Central Records. It covers the entire floor. It is a labyrinth of steel cabinets, squeezed so tight that you have to turn sideways to walk between them. There are no windows. The rent is cheaper down here. This leads to a niche, structural detail. The live load segregation. Architects eventually realized they could just reinforce every floor for the crushing weight of paper. It was too expensive. So, they designed skyscrapers with specific, reinforced zones. The lower floors, or the core near the elevator shafts, were built with extra steel to hold the cabinets, 100+ lbs. per square foot. The outer rings and upper floors were built lighter. For humans, 50 pounds. Per square foot, the geography of the building was dictated by the density of the paper. The heavy memories sank to the bottom, the light thoughts floated to the top. You walk through the aisles of central records. You see a new kind of cabinet. It isn't a drawer that pulls out. It is a lateral file. The drawers roll out sideways. Or the shelves rotate on a chain drive, like a Ferris wheel, a rotary file. Why? Because the pull-out drawer takes up space. You need room to stand in front of it. The lateral file saves 30% of the floor space. You are fighting a war for inches. But the enemy is winning. You look at the inbox on the head clerk's desk. It is overflowing. This brings us to the information explosion of the post-war era. The invention of the Xerox machine 1959 is just around the corner, but even before that, the mimeograph and the photostat are churning out duplicates at a terrifying rate. In the 1890s, you made one carbon copy. Now, in 1955, you make 5 copies. One for legal, one for accounting, one for the regional manager, one for the file, and one just in case. The volume of paper is doubling every 7 years. This leads to a massive academic controversy. The paperless office, myth. Around this time, futurists began to predict the end of paper. Vannevar Bush wrote about the Memex, a microfilm desk. Later, in the 1970s, Businessweek would famously predict the paperless office. Campa, the futurists, argued that microfilm and later, computers would make the filing cabinet obsolete. They showed pictures of a single shoebox of film replacing a whole room of files. Camp B, the Sellon and Harper School, argues the opposite. The myth of the paperless office. They discovered a paradox. New technology generates more paper, not less. When you got a computer, you didn't stop printing. You printed drafts, you printed emails, you printed spreadsheets. The ease of creating documents meant you created more of them. The microfilm revolution failed because people hated reading on screens. They would find the film, print it out on paper to read it, and then file the paper. So, instead of replacing the cabinet, the technology just fed it. You look at the clerks, they are drowning. They are moving files from the active cabinets to the inactive cabinets in the warehouse. They are boxing them up for Iron Mountain. Yes, that Iron Mountain, an old mushroom mine in Pennsylvania where corporations send their paper to be buried under rock, guarded by armed men. The ultimate filing cabinet? You realize the terrifying truth of the 20th century. We built these skyscrapers not to house people, but to house the paper that people generate. We are the guests. The files are the residents. You walk over to a gray steel cabinet in the corner. It is dented. It has a coffee ring stain on the top. You pull the handle. Clang. The sound echoes. It is the sound of the modern world inside. The manila folders are packed so tight you can get a finger in. You struggle to pull one out. Union Pacific, 1955. The file is thick. It contains contracts, blueprints, telegrams, and photos. It is the DNA of the company. You close the drawer. You lean your forehead against the cold metal. You started this journey with a spike on a desk. You ended up inside a steel canyon. The system worked. It worked too well. It organized the world, but it also calcified it. It turned the fluidity of human thought into a static, heavy physical brick that must be guarded, cooled, and stored. You are tired. The hum of the fluorescent lights is giving you a headache. The office is emptying out. The clerks are going home. The lights in the central records room are flicked off, row by row. Click, click, click. Darkness swallows the aisles, but the cabinets are still there. Silent, heavy. Waiting. They don't sleep. They don't eat. They just hold. You walk to the elevator. You press the button for the lobby. You are leaving the machine. But you know that tomorrow the mail will come, the typists will type, the Xerox will hum, and the drawers will open again. We are jumping forward one last time. We are leaving the smoky offices of the 1890s and the bustling skyscrapers of the 1950s. We are arriving in the present day. You are standing in the corner of a quiet room. It might be a basement, a thrift store, or the back office of an old mechanic's shop. The fluorescent lights are humming, and there, pushed against the wall, is the survivor. It is a 4-drawer, vertical filing cabinet. It is painted a dull, industrial gray, a color technically known as putty. It has a few dents near the bottom. One of the brass label holders is missing. It looks boring. It looks like the most invisible object in the world. But you know better. You know its secret history. You reach out and touch the cold steel. You pull the handle. Scree, thump, the sound is unmistakable. It is the sound of the 20th century closing for business inside. There are still a few hanging folders, an invention we didn't even get to discuss. But another layer of the suspension bridge for paper. They sway gently. They are empty. The paper has moved. It has migrated into the cloud. But look at your computer screen. Look at your desktop. What do you see? You see a little yellow icon. It has a tab on the top left. It is a manila folder. You drag a document into it. You drag a file to the trash can. This brings us to the final mainstream historical fact: skeuomorphism. The filing cabinet was so successful, so dominant, that when computer engineers designed the first digital interfaces, like the Apple Lisa and Macintosh, they didn't invent new metaphors. They stole the old ones. They couldn't imagine a world without files, folders, and tabs. The physical cabinet may be rusting in a landfill, but its ghost haunts every single smartphone and laptop on Earth. You are still filing. You are just doing it with pixels instead of steel. But there is a sadness to the physical object. You look at the empty drawer. This metal box was once the external brain of humanity. It held the birth certificates, the marriage licenses, the secret treaties, and the blueprints for the atomic bomb. It held the proof that we existed. When you opened a drawer, you could smell the history. You could feel the weight of it. Now, the history is weightless. It is invisible. And because it is invisible, it feels fragile. This leads to the final academic reflection. The monument to anxiety. Why did we build these things? Why did Edwin Sables turn a cigar box on its side? Because we were terrified of forgetting. The 19th century unleashed a torrent of information. Telegraphs, trains, carbon copies. That threatened to drown us. We felt small, we felt overwhelmed. The filing cabinet was our answer. It was a fortress. It said, I can contain this. I can put the world in a box, label it, and lock it away. It was a machine for producing peace of mind. You slide the drawer shut. The latch clicks. The lock engages. The chaos is contained. You step back. The room is silent. You are no longer a clerk fighting a mountain of paper. You are no longer a cog in the machine. You are the master of the archive. You have traced the journey from the dangerous metal spike on a desk to the infinite depths of the steel tower. You understand that order is not natural. Order is something we build. One folder at a time, to keep the darkness at bay. You turn off the lights. The gray cabinet disappears into the shadows. It stands there, a silent sentinel guarding the ghosts of 1 billion letters. It has done its job, and now, so have you. The final sort, and so, the office closes. The typewriters fall silent. The phones stop ringing. The heavy steel drawers have all been pushed shut, locking away the noise and the demands of the day. You can stop organizing now. You don't have to alphabetize your thoughts. You don't have to label your dreams. Imagine you are standing in a vast, quiet library. The shelves are empty, not because they are bare, but because everything has been resolved. The air is cool and still, smelling of old paper and rest. There is no urgency here. There is no inbox waiting for you. You are safe. The anxiety of the day has been filed away in a cabinet that is locked, and you have thrown away the key. Your mind is a clean desk, smooth, uncluttered, ready for rest. Feel your shoulders drop.